you'll never be missed. That's what Marcus Whitfield said on February 3, 2025 at 4:15 p.m. in his corner office at Whitfield Financial Advisors, laughing while he terminated my employment as senior wealth manager and told me that clients wouldn't notice or care that I was gone because relationships belonged to the firm rather than to individual advisors. His confidence suggesting that 10 years of building client relationships, managing $240 million in assets, and generating $1.8 million in annual fees meant nothing compared to the Whitfield name and reputation. The afternoon light through his window illuminated the industry awards on his walls while I stood holding a banker's box containing my personal items and 10 years of client documentation showing that my relationships with 38 high-net-worth clients weren't based on the Whitfield brand but on trust, performance, and personal service that I'd provided through market volatility, life transitions, and financial planning that went far beyond investment management. I'd been senior wealth manager at Whitfield Financial Advisors for 10 years, 4 months, and 17 days, responsible for managing portfolios for ultra-high net worth individuals and families, providing comprehensive financial planning, coordinating tax and estate strategies, and building the kind of deep advisory relationships where clients called me before making major financial decisions because they trusted my judgment and valued advice that prioritized their interests over firm revenue. And Marcus, who'd inherited the firm from his father 3 years earlier at age 37 with an MBA and absolutely zero experience managing actual client relationships, had decided that my concerns about his aggressive product pushing and fee maximization strategies meant I wasn't a team player who understood that wealth management was about firm profitability rather than client outcomes. I'm Catherine Morrison, and I stood in that office knowing exactly what fiduciary duty meant under the Investment Advisors Act. That registered investment advisors are legally required to put client interests first and that recommending products based on firm compensation rather than client suitability violated those fiduciary obligations, and knowing that the business practices Marcus had implemented over 18 months, including steering clients toward high-fee proprietary products, recommending unnecessary portfolio turnover to generate trading commissions, and pressuring advisors to cross-sell insurance and lending products that paid the firm referral fees regardless of whether clients needed them, systematically violated the fiduciary standards that distinguished advice from sales. 10 years, 4 months, and 17 days of managing client portfolios according to their objectives and risk tolerance rather than firm revenue targets, providing investment recommendations based on cost efficiency and suitability rather than internal compensation structures, and maintaining the client-first approach that had generated a 97% client retention rate while competitors struggled with 60 to 70% retention, and Marcus had decided that my refusal to push proprietary products and maximize transaction fees meant I didn't understand modern wealth management business models. I wasn't the chief investment officer who set overall investment strategy or the managing partner who ran firm operations. I drove a 2017 Lexus ES350 with 134,567 miles that I'd purchased used because spending money on luxury cars seemed foolish when clients needed advice about managing their wealth responsibly, and my back seat contained client files, financial planning materials, and research reports I reviewed during evenings because understanding client situations deeply required more than quarterly review meetings. I lived in a 920-square-foot condo with a home office containing comprehensive files on each of my 38 client relationships including detailed financial plans, investment policy statements, meeting notes documenting every conversation and recommendation over 10 years, and the kind of thorough documentation that demonstrated I understood each client's goals, concerns, family situations, and the personal circumstances that influenced their financial decisions. I was methodical about client service, careful about fiduciary obligations, and protective of the trust relationships that made clients comfortable sharing sensitive financial information, and apparently Marcus thought these characteristics made me someone who would never be missed rather than the advisor whose client relationships were based on personal trust that wouldn't automatically transfer to whoever inherited my client book. I joined Whitfield Financial Advisors in October 2014 as a wealth manager when they were a respected independent registered investment advisor serving high-net-worth families in the greater Boston area. The firm managed approximately $800 million in assets for 120 client households, emphasizing personalized service, comprehensive financial planning, and investment management that prioritized client objectives over product sales. Whitfield's founder, Robert Whitfield, had built the firm's reputation on fiduciary advisory relationships where recommendations were based solely on what was best for clients. The firm was fee-only, meaning we charged asset management fees and financial planning fees but didn't receive commissions, referral payments, or other third-party compensation that could create conflicts of interest. This alignment of interests, where the firm only made more money when client portfolios grew through market returns rather than through product sales, was core to Whitfield's value proposition. My role as wealth manager involved managing investment portfolios, developing financial plans, coordinating with clients' tax advisors and attorneys, and serving as the primary point of contact for all financial questions. Over 10 years, I built a practice managing 38 client relationships representing $240 million in assets under management. These weren't transactional relationships. My clients trusted me with comprehensive financial planning including retirement projections, estate planning coordination, tax optimization strategies, college funding, business succession planning, and the complex financial decisions that ultra-high net worth families face. I knew their children's names, understood their charitable priorities, had guided them through divorces and business sales and inheritance situations, and maintained relationships built over a decade of consistent service and advice that consistently prioritized their interests. This approach generated exceptional client loyalty. My client retention rate over 10 years was 97%, meaning only one client had left my practice in a decade, and that was due to relocation out of state. Industry benchmarks for wealth management client retention are 65 to 70%, meaning typical advisors lose 3 to 4 out of every 10 clients over a decade due to dissatisfaction, competing offers, or relationship failures. Robert Whitfield retired in March 2022 at age 68 and transferred ownership to his son Marcus, who'd worked in the firm for 7 years in business development and operations roles but had never managed client relationships directly. Marcus had strong opinions about how Whitfield should evolve to optimize revenue and maximize enterprise value for an eventual sale. His first major change in June 2022 was launching proprietary investment products. Whitfield partnered with an asset management firm to create branded mutual funds and separately managed accounts that carried higher fees than the low-cost index funds and institutional share class investments we'd historically used for clients. Marcus mandated that advisors allocate at least 30% of client portfolios to these proprietary products, which generated additional revenue for Whitfield through revenue-sharing arrangements with the asset manager. I raised concerns immediately. The proprietary products had expense ratios of 1.2 to 1.6% annually compared to 0.05 to 0.3% for the index funds we'd been using. This meant clients would pay an additional $7,000 to $13,000 annually in investment expenses on a $1 million portfolio with no evidence that the proprietary products would generate sufficient additional returns to justify the higher costs. The revenue-sharing arrangement created a conflict of interest where Whitfield made more money when clients paid higher investment expenses, directly contradicting fiduciary obligations. I documented these concerns in a memo to Marcus on June 15, 2022 explaining that steering clients toward higher-cost proprietary products to benefit firm revenue violated fiduciary duty and SEC regulations governing investment advisor conflicts of interest. Marcus responded that the proprietary products were within the range of appropriate investments and that advisors had discretion to use them when suitable. But Marcus's subsequent directive made clear that discretion meant requirement. In July 2022, he began monitoring advisor portfolios and questioning any advisor whose proprietary product allocation fell below 30%. Advisors who didn't meet the threshold received emails asking them to explain their underutilization of firm investment solutions. I didn't shift my clients into proprietary products. I explained to Marcus that my clients' investment policy statements, which documented their investment objectives and preferences, emphasized cost efficiency and evidence-based investing using low-cost index funds. Changing to higher-cost actively managed proprietary products without clear benefit to clients would violate their documented preferences and my fiduciary duty. Marcus's response was that I needed to update client investment policy statements to reflect modern investment approaches that included proprietary products. This meant changing client documentation to justify decisions that benefited the firm rather than maintaining documentation that protected client interests. Similar conflicts emerged around trading activity. Marcus implemented portfolio optimization reviews where advisors were expected to identify opportunities to rebalance portfolios, adjust allocations, or make tactical changes that would generate trading activity. Whitfield had historically used low turnover, buy and hold strategies that minimized trading costs and tax consequences for clients. Marcus wanted advisors generating more trades because Whitfield earned trading commissions through its custodian relationship. I documented concerns about unnecessary turnover generating costs and taxes for clients without corresponding benefits. Marcus characterized my concerns as resistance to active portfolio management and suggested I didn't understand that dynamic allocation was how modern wealth managers added value. By early 2024, the conflicts had multiplied. Marcus introduced insurance cross-selling requirements where advisors were expected to review client situations for life insurance opportunities and refer them to affiliated insurance agents who paid Whitfield referral fees. He launched a lending division offering securities-backed lines of credit to clients, with advisors receiving bonuses for generating loan referrals. He mandated participation in sponsored investment conferences where asset managers paid to present products to Whitfield advisors, creating subtle pressure to use those managers' products. Each initiative created conflicts between client interests and firm revenue. Each time I raised concerns, Marcus dismissed them as outdated thinking about wealth management business models. In January 2025, I had comprehensive annual review meetings with my 38 client households. During these meetings, several clients raised questions about changes they'd noticed in Whitfield's approach. One client asked why his statement showed higher investment expenses than previous years. Another asked about the insurance review that seemed unusually aggressive about selling permanent life insurance. A third client expressed concern that portfolio recommendations seemed focused on products that generated commissions rather than minimizing costs. I answered honestly. I explained that Whitfield had implemented new business practices that I had concerns about from a fiduciary standpoint. I told clients that I was working to maintain the client-first approach they'd relied on but that I was experiencing pressure to adopt practices I believed conflicted with their interests. This transparency was appropriate, I believed, as part of my fiduciary duty to ensure clients understood potential conflicts affecting advice they received. But it also created a problem for Marcus when clients began calling the firm to complain about the new business direction. On January 28, 2025, I was called to Marcus's office for what he described as a performance discussion. Present were Marcus and the firm's HR director. "Catherine, I've received complaints from several of your clients about comments you've made questioning firm business practices," Marcus said. "You've been telling clients that you have concerns about our investment products and service model. That's undermining firm relationships and creating unnecessary client anxiety." "I've been answering client questions honestly about changes in firm practices," I replied. Clients asked why expenses increased or why they're receiving insurance sales pitches. I explained that the firm has adopted new revenue strategies. That's disclosure of material conflicts of interest, which is required under fiduciary obligations. "You've been sabotaging the firm's business initiatives by characterizing them as conflicts or problems rather than as enhancements to our service offering. They are conflicts. Steering clients to high-cost proprietary products benefits firm revenue at client expense. Generating unnecessary trading activity costs clients money to earn commissions. Cross-selling insurance and loans creates referral fee conflicts. These are actual conflicts of interest that SEC regulations require disclosing, not enhancements to present positively. Your interpretation of fiduciary duty is extreme and impractical," Marcus said. "Every wealth management firm has multiple revenue streams. Product partnerships, referral arrangements, and trading revenue are standard industry practices. Your insistence that these are improper conflicts shows you don't understand modern wealth management business models. I understand that registered investment advisors have legal fiduciary obligations that require putting client interests first. Revenue strategies that prioritize firm compensation over client outcomes violate those obligations. Marcus's expression hardened. Catherine, I don't think this is working anymore. Your approach to client relationships and your resistance to firm business strategies make it clear that you're not aligned with Whitfield's direction. I'm terminating your employment effective immediately. I wasn't surprised. I'd anticipated this possibility as conflicts escalated. What happens to my client relationships? I asked. They're firm clients, not your personal clients. They'll be reassigned to other advisors who understand how to work within our business model. Client relationships in wealth management are built on personal trust. You're assuming clients will automatically accept reassignment to advisors they don't know who will implement the practices I've told them I have concerns about. That's their choice. But you won't be influencing their decisions because you'll be leaving immediately. Marcus handed me a termination letter and a separation agreement. You have 1 week to review and sign this. It includes a non-solicitation agreement preventing you from contacting Whitfield clients for 2 years. I reviewed the separation agreement carefully with an attorney over the following week. The non-solicitation clause prohibited me from directly or indirectly soliciting, contacting, or encouraging any Whitfield client to terminate their relationship with Whitfield or to transfer assets to another advisory firm. This was broader than typical non-solicitation agreements, which usually prohibited only direct solicitation rather than any contact. My attorney, Jennifer Walsh, advised that the non-solicitation was likely unenforceable as written because it was overbroad and because Massachusetts law disfavors agreements that prevent professionals from earning a livelihood. But signing it would create complications if clients contacted me, which she expected would happen. I didn't sign the separation agreement. Instead, I informed Whitfield on February 10 that I was declining to sign an agreement with provisions I believed were unenforceable and contrary to client interests. I also filed paperwork to register my own investment advisory firm. Morrison Wealth Management was registered with the SEC on February 14, 2025 as an independent registered investment advisor. I leased small office space, set up operations, and prepared to serve clients according to fiduciary principles without conflicts created by proprietary products, referral fees, or revenue optimization mandates. I did not contact any Whitfield clients. I did not solicit them to leave Whitfield. I simply established my practice and waited to see what would happen. Now about 77% of you think I'm about to start secretly calling clients to steal them from Whitfield as revenge for being fired, and you're completely wrong. Subscribe right now, because what actually happens is that clients independently discover I've left Whitfield, independently research where I've gone, and independently decide whether to stay with Whitfield or transfer to my new firm based on their own assessment of where they'll receive better service. And when Marcus's largest client, the Henderson family with $42 million in assets, walks into my office 2 weeks after I open Morrison Wealth Management, it's not because I solicited them but because they spent 10 years trusting my advice and they'd rather work with an advisor whose fiduciary duty they trust than stay with a firm whose business model creates conflicts they've become uncomfortable with. The first client contact came on February 18, 4 days after I registered Morrison Wealth Management. David Chen, a client I'd worked with for 9 years managing $17 million in assets, called my cell phone. "Catherine, I heard you left Whitfield. What happened?" I had disagreements with firm leadership about business practices that I believed conflicted with client interests. I chose to leave rather than continue working in an environment where I couldn't provide advice consistent with fiduciary principles. Where are you now? I've registered my own advisory firm. Morrison Wealth Management. Independent, fee only, no conflicts from proprietary products or referral arrangements. That's what I figured you'd do. Whitfield assigned me to another advisor. Nice person, but I don't know her, and she immediately suggested moving 30% of my portfolio into Whitfield's proprietary funds. Same conversation you and I had 6 months ago about why those funds weren't appropriate for my situation. That's your decision whether to accept that recommendation. My decision is that I want to work with you. How do I transfer my accounts to Morrison Wealth Management? This conversation repeated with client after client over the following weeks. Clients learned I'd left Whitfield through various channels, some from conversations with the reassigned advisors who couldn't answer questions as thoroughly as I had, some from networking with other clients, some from Google searches finding my new firm's registration. Each client who contacted me had made an independent decision to ask where I'd gone and what my new situation was. I didn't encourage them to leave Whitfield. I answered their questions honestly about why I'd left, explained my new firm's structure and fee arrangement, and told them the decision about where to work with an advisor was entirely theirs to make based on where they'd receive service aligned with their interests. But I also didn't discourage them. When clients said they wanted to transfer to Morrison Wealth Management, I provided account transfer paperwork and facilitated the transition. By early March 2025, 12 of my former 38 Whitfield clients had transferred to Morrison Wealth Management, representing $84 million in assets under management. Each transfer was initiated by the client through independent decision-making based on their assessment of where they preferred to receive advisory services. On March 10, 2025, I received a call from Robert Henderson. The Henderson family was Marcus Whitfield's largest personal client, a relationship Marcus had inherited from his father and had managed directly rather than delegating to other advisors. The Hendersons had $42 million in assets at Whitfield, generating approximately $315,000 in annual fees, representing Whitfield's single largest client relationship by asset size. Robert was 74 years old, had built a successful manufacturing business that he'd sold in 2018, and was managing retirement assets for himself and his wife along with trust accounts for their 3 adult children and 6 grandchildren. I'd worked with the Henderson family for 8 years managing certain family trust accounts that were part of my assigned client relationships, though Marcus personally managed Robert and his wife's primary accounts. Catherine, I heard you left Whitfield and started your own firm. I wanted to talk with you about our family's situation. We met at my office on March 12. Robert explained that he'd become increasingly uncomfortable with changes at Whitfield since Marcus took over. Marcus has been pushing us to use Whitfield's new investment products. Higher fees, more complexity, and honestly I don't understand why we need them. His father managed our money using simple, low-cost index funds for 20 years with excellent results. Marcus keeps telling me that modern investing requires more sophisticated approaches, but it looks to me like the main thing that's more sophisticated is the fee structure. Those proprietary products generate additional revenue for Whitfield through revenue-sharing arrangements with the asset managers. That creates a conflict of interest where Whitfield makes more money when you pay higher investment expenses. That's what I suspected. Marcus also suggested we borrow against our portfolio using Whitfield's securities-backed lending program. We don't need to borrow money, we have more than we'll ever spend. But Marcus said it was tax-efficient wealth management. Seems to me the main efficiency is Whitfield earning interest on loans we don't need. Securities-backed lending can be appropriate for specific situations. But recommending it when clients don't have a borrowing need creates questions about whether the recommendation is based on client benefit or firm revenue from loan interest and origination fees. Robert nodded. My wife and I have been talking about this. We've worked with your family for 8 years managing the grandchildren's trusts. You've always been straightforward, conservative, and focused on what's best for the kids rather than on generating fees. We trust your judgment. Marcus is focused on sales. We've decided we want to move our entire family relationship to Morrison Wealth Management if you'll take us on as clients. I'd be honored to work with your family. But I want to be clear about the implications. Moving $42 million from Whitfield will have a significant impact on their business. Marcus will likely be upset. And there may be legal complications if Whitfield claims I improperly solicited you. You didn't solicit us. I called you. I initiated this meeting. I'm making this decision based on 30 years of experience working with wealth advisors and my assessment that you'll provide better service aligned with our family's interests. If Marcus has a problem with that, he can explain why. Clients are leaving rather than blaming the advisor they're choosing to work with. The Henderson family transferred their full $42 million relationship to Morrison Wealth Management on March 18, 2025. Marcus's response was immediate and furious. On March 19, I received a cease and desist letter from Whitfield's attorneys alleging that I had violated implied non-solicitation obligations by stealing Whitfield's largest client through improper interference with client relationships. The letter demanded that I immediately cease all contact with former Whitfield clients and take steps to reverse any client transfers resulting from improper solicitation. It threatened litigation for tortious interference with business relationships and breach of fiduciary duty to Whitfield. My attorney Jennifer responded that I had not solicited any clients, that each client transfer was initiated by the client through independent decision-making, that clients have the right to choose their advisor regardless of previous firm relationships, and that threatening litigation to prevent clients from exercising that choice was itself potentially improper. On March 25, 2025, Whitfield Financial Advisors filed a lawsuit against me and Morrison Wealth Management alleging breach of duty, tortious interference with business relationships, unfair competition, and misappropriation of proprietary client information. The lawsuit claimed damages of $5 million based on projected lost revenue from clients who transferred to my firm. The case centered on whether clients who independently chose to follow me to a new firm constituted improper solicitation or legitimate client choice. Whitfield argued that I had poisoned client relationships during my employment by raising concerns about firm practices, that I had lured clients to my firm through representations that Whitfield's business model was unethical, and that client transfers so soon after my departure proved improper solicitation. My defense was straightforward. I had disclosed material conflicts of interest to clients as required by fiduciary duty. I had not contacted any clients to encourage transfers. Each client had independently initiated contact and made autonomous decisions about whether to transfer. And clients have a fundamental right to choose their financial advisor based on their assessment of where they'll receive service aligned with their interests. Discovery phase lasted 4 months. During depositions, multiple former clients testified about why they'd chosen to transfer to Morrison Wealth Management. The pattern was consistent. They had become concerned about Whitfield's business model changes. They valued the decade-long relationship with me. They trusted my judgment more than they trusted Marcus's sales-oriented approach, and they made independent decisions based on their assessment of where they'd receive better service. Robert Henderson's deposition was particularly compelling. When Whitfield's attorney asked why he'd transferred his family's $42 million relationship to Morrison Wealth Management, Robert stated, "Because Catherine Morrison spent 8 years demonstrating that she prioritizes client interests over fees and sales." Marcus Whitfield spent 3 years demonstrating that he prioritizes firm revenue over client outcomes. That's not a difficult choice for anyone who understands the difference between advice and sales. The case went to trial in September 2025. The central question was whether advisors who change firms are permitted to accept clients who independently choose to follow them, or whether firms can claim ownership of client relationships regardless of client preferences. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a verdict on September 24, 2025. They found that I had not breached any duties to Whitfield, had not tortiously interfered with business relationships, and had not engaged in unfair competition. The verdict specifically found that clients had exercised independent choice in deciding to transfer their relationships and that such transfers were a normal consequence of the advisory business where relationships are built on personal trust rather than firm affiliation. The verdict also included findings that Whitfield's business practices, including the proprietary product mandates and revenue-sharing arrangements I'd raised concerns about, created conflicts of interest that clients had legitimate reasons to be concerned about when making decisions about where to maintain advisory relationships. Whitfield appealed the verdict. The Massachusetts Appeals Court affirmed the decision in March 2026, holding that client relationships in professional services are based on trust and personal service, not institutional ownership, and clients retain fundamental rights to choose service providers based on their assessment of where their interests will be best served. By the time the appeals court decision was issued, Morrison Wealth Management managed $130 million in assets for 42 client households. 28 of these clients had transferred from Whitfield, while 14 were new relationships referred by existing clients who appreciated Morrison's fee-only, conflict-free approach. Whitfield Financial Advisors' assets under management had declined from $1.2 billion to $800 million as clients beyond my former relationships also left due to concerns about the firm's business model changes. On April 15, 2026, I ran into Marcus at an industry conference. He was presenting on a panel about client retention strategies in wealth management, which struck me as ironic given Whitfield's 33% client asset decline over 2 years. He approached me after his panel presentation. "Catherine, I see Morrison Wealth Management is doing well. Congratulations on building that from clients you took from Whitfield. From clients who independently chose to transfer their relationships based on their assessment of where they'd receive better service. The courts confirmed twice that those were legitimate client choices, not improper solicitation. You poisoned those relationships during your employment by telling clients our business practices were conflicts. You set up your departure by undermining client confidence in Whitfield. I disclosed material conflicts of interest as required by fiduciary duty. Steering clients to high-cost proprietary products to benefit firm revenue is a conflict. Generating unnecessary trading to earn commissions is a conflict. Cross-selling insurance and loans for referral fees creates conflicts. Clients deserve to know that the advice they were receiving was influenced by firm compensation structures. That's not poisoning relationships, that's transparency required by regulations. The jury bought your story about client choice, but we both know you targeted my largest client specifically to damage the firm. Robert Henderson called me. I didn't solicit him. He made an independent decision based on 30 years of experience working with advisors and his assessment that Morrison Wealth Management would serve his family's interests better than Whitfield's sales-focused approach. If you want to understand why clients left, look at the business model changes you implemented that prioritized firm revenue over client outcomes. Wealth management is a business. Firms need revenue to survive. You're acting like generating profit is unethical. Generating profit is fine. Generating profit by creating conflicts that harm client interests violates fiduciary duty. That's the distinction you never understood. You inherited a respected advisory firm built on client-first principles and transformed it into a sales organization where product pushing and fee maximization took priority over advice. Clients noticed. Some of them decided to work with an advisor who hadn't abandoned fiduciary principles. That's not theft, that's market consequences of business decisions you made. Marcus walked away looking frustrated. Here's what they don't teach wealth managers about client relationships: they're not owned by firms, they're earned by advisors through years of service, trust, and putting client interests first. Clients are not assets that transfer automatically when advisors change firms. Clients are human beings with agency who make choices about where they'll receive advice based on their assessment of who they trust and who they believe will serve their interests. Marcus thought firing me would cause minimal disruption because client relationships belonged to the firm and would smoothly transfer to other advisors. What actually happened was that clients who'd spent a decade trusting my judgment independently decided they'd rather work with me at a new firm than stay with advisors they didn't know implementing practices they'd become uncomfortable with. The math is straightforward. 28 Whitfield clients, representing $130 million in assets, independently chose to transfer to Morrison Wealth Management within 18 months of my departure. Each transfer was initiated by the client. Each client provided testimony during litigation confirming they'd made autonomous decisions based on their assessment of where they'd receive better service. The courts affirmed twice that these were legitimate client choices, not improper solicitation. Whitfield lost approximately $975,000 in annual revenue from those client transfers. They spent approximately $380,000 in legal fees trying to prevent clients from exercising choice about their advisors. And their reputation as a client-first advisory firm was damaged by litigation revealing the conflicts in their business model. Morrison Wealth Management generated approximately $975,000 in annual revenue from clients who chose to work with me based on relationships built over a decade, plus additional revenue from new clients referred by existing clients who valued the conflict-free approach. The firm's growth validated that clients prioritize trust and fiduciary service over brand names and sales-focused business models. You want to tell advisors they'll never be missed while assuming client relationships will smoothly transfer to whoever inherits the book. Go ahead. But remember that wealth management relationships are personal, that clients value advisors they trust over firms they're assigned to, and that when clients independently choose to follow an advisor to a new firm, that's client choice exercising rights affirmed by courts, not improper solicitation that can be litigated away. Marcus laughed that I'd never be missed while terminating my employment. 28 clients missed me enough to independently research where I'd gone and transfer their relationships. Robert Henderson missed me enough to move a $42 million family relationship. The courts missed the merit in Whitfield's claims enough to rule twice that client transfers were legitimate exercises of choice. I kept my Lexus with 134,567 miles that reflected priorities about spending client money wisely. I kept my comprehensive client files documenting 10 years of relationships built on trust and service. I kept the fiduciary approach that prioritized client interests over revenue optimization. Marcus is presenting at conferences about client retention while his firm's assets declined 33% due to clients leaving over concerns about conflicts. Whitfield Financial Advisors is rebuilding its reputation after litigation revealed the revenue-focused business model that drove clients away. And Morrison Wealth Management is serving 42 client households who independently chose to work with an advisor whose fiduciary duty they trust rather than stay with a firm whose business model created conflicts they'd become uncomfortable with. Never be missed? Clients missed me enough to initiate transfers, testify in litigation, and build a new firm through referrals to other clients who value conflict-free advice. Sometimes the person who'll never be missed is exactly the person clients spend a decade learning to trust, and missing them is what drives independent decisions to work with them regardless of what firm name appears on the letterhead. He said I'd never be missed, then his biggest client walked into my office. Not because I solicited them, but because they missed 10 years of advice they trusted and independently decided they'd rather work with an advisor whose fiduciary duty aligned with their interests than stay with a firm whose business model prioritized revenue over recommendations. Courts confirmed that's client choice, not theft. Common sense confirms that's what happens when you assume relationships belong to firms rather than being earned by advisors through service that clients value enough to follow when advisors change firms.